saga of the federal government's trip, entourage, junket to the King's coronation really is the gift that keeps on giving to the Conservatives. The only problem is that it is the taxpayers who keep giving the gift to the Liberals and their government in the form of these incredibly large, expensive junkets. And joining me now is Franco Terrazzano with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. The King's coronation junket, we're close to getting a final number pegged on just how enormous this thing was. Tell us about this.
Well, look, taxpayers are on the hook for what? $534,000 for the federal government's trip to England for the King's coronation. Now, look, I understand the King's coronation is a big event, but that does not give the government of Canada a blank check to spend more than $500,000 so 102 delegates can go to England for 3 days. Folks, you hear that? $534,000 is the bill to taxpayers. That doesn't even include airfare for 102 delegates. So let's break down the math even more. That is a cost per traveler of about $5,200 for 3 days.
That's outrageous, and that doesn't even include the airfare yet. The CTF first broke the story of the $6,000 hotel room that they wouldn't tell us who stayed in it, even though we definitely all knew. It took a very long time for you to just wring that little bit of information out of them.
Well, so we're the ones in that story. If I'm not mistaken, the Toronto Sun, I think Brian Lilley might have broke the original one. Good digging for him. But what the Canadian Taxpayers Federation did is we launched a legal challenge. Why did we launch a legal challenge? Because we filed an access to information request to see who stayed in the room. Now, look, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to know that it was always Mr. Justin Trudeau who stayed in that room, but we wanted to set a precedent. You waste taxpayers' money, you got to be honest about it. You got to face the crowd. So what did the government do? They wrote down Justin Trudeau's name and then they blacked it out. They sent us a redacted ATIP. So we launched a legal challenge. We forced them to fess up. And Trudeau, he knew he was going to lose that legal challenge, so he finally admitted that it was him who stayed in the $6,000 per night hotel room. But when did he admit it? The day that President Joe Biden was coming to town, folks. That's called a cover-up.
Yeah, that's burying the lead a little bit. Now, you guys broke down some of the numbers here, and it's outrageous. It makes you wonder if there was anybody actually left in Ottawa. So, as you said, Canada's delegation was 102 people. 87 people traveling with Justin Trudeau and 15 more traveling with Governor General Mary Simon. And you know she's got a taste for luxury, don't you?
Oh, she sure does. Now, folks, that joke is in reference to another access to information request this Canadian Taxpayers Federation dug up when we found that the Governor General and her entourage in a separate trip to the Middle East spent almost $100,000 on fancy airplane food, right? They were dining on beef Wellington, beef Carpaccio, stuffed pork tenderloin. Mwah! I get hungry just thinking about the fancy feast that they had. Now, folks, if you've traveled on Air Canada or WestJet, you can't even get beef Wellington flavored chips. But I guess if you're the Governor General and you're spending other people's money, you can afford to dine on beef Wellington at the taxpayer expense. Now, I want to kind of come back to the real key issue here, right? Because number one, $530,000 of taxpayers' money to go to a 3-day trip with over 100 people, that's ludicrous, right? That's ludicrous. But also just factor in what was going on in Canada when that happened. How many people worried about losing their mortgage? How many people just worried about the ground turkey that they want to pick up for taco night to feed their families? Or how many people just are worried that they can't afford to fuel up their car on the way to work? Okay, but there's one other important issue here. And it's the fact that this is not the exception. It's become the rule in Ottawa to make taxpayers pay for your fancy trips, right? It almost seems like this government is going out of its way to bring as many people as possible to stay in the fanciest of hotels and to take the sweetest rides.
And that is chilling for somebody like me because we're coming up to the annual climate change conference. This year it's in Dubai, in the UAE. So you know that the federal government is going to take a massive entourage, as they tend to do. They tend to be some of the largest, like the feds, the liberals, their entourage is usually much larger than, let's say, the Americans, a country 10 times our size. And it's Dubai. I just went there for work. We were exploring the Abraham Accords. If you're looking for luxury, you can find it there. And I'm worried that the feds are really, really going to find it while they're there.
Oh, I am too. And we're going to keep an eye on it. I'm sure, Sheila, you and your team are going to as well. We certainly are. Because let's not forget, folks, what was it? I don't know. Can't remember the number. Maybe COP26, the one in Glasgow, Scotland. When the Canadian delegation, we sent the largest delegation out of any G7 country, including the host country, the United Kingdom. So we sent more people to their conference than they did. Not only that, our dear finance minister, Chrisa Freeland, what did she do? Well, she booked a hotel in the wrong city, Edinburgh, 86 kilometers away from Glasgow. Okay, then what did she do in her infinite wisdom? Well, she decided to book taxpayers or bill taxpayers for thousands of dollars on a chauffeur service. So look, first of all, why are we sending the biggest delegation out of any G7 country? But second of all, do you not have Google Maps on your phone? Couldn't Google the fact that Edinburgh is not in the same place as Glasgow? I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, and also very frightening that that is the woman in charge of the entire Canadian economy. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is because of the fiscal update from the federal government.
Brutal.
And brutal. And you had a great op-ed about a week ago about how the budget proves that Trudeau is not serious about federal finances. I don't think you could be if you put Chrisa Freeland in charge of them. But just the escalating debt and what that really means for Canadians. I mean, it's causing an inflationary crisis. You tack on the escalating carbon tax on top of that. And Canadians are in for a lot of trouble. And I don't think the feds have a plan to get us out of this.
Oh, they couldn't balance the budget of a lemonade stand, right? But look, the debt is directly related to your high cost of living. Here's what happened during the pandemic, right? They ran these massive deficits, sometimes into the hundreds of billions of dollars, and then they had their Bank of Canada print up hundreds of billions of new dollars, largely purchasing the government debt. That is literally, ladies and gentlemen, the inflation tax, okay? But let's even move past that. Another huge concern are the interest charges on the government credit card. This year alone, the interest charges on the government debt will cost taxpayers about $4 billion every single month. Billions of dollars every month that isn't improving services, isn't lowering taxes because it's going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street just to service the government's debt. But listen to this, folks. Next year, interest charges on the federal debt will surpass the amount of money the federal government sends to the provinces for health transfers. Okay? In a couple of years, a handful of years, interest charges on the government debt will equal the entire revenue of the GST, the government sales tax. So every penny the government brings in through the GST in 2028 will be going to interest charges on the government debt. Let that sink in, folks.